This week on the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast, we talk about the more recent rumors. Once again, Obi-Wan, the series, is Ewan McGregor back? Also, Resistance Season 2, the final season, a trailer. We'll get into that. Plus, much, much more. Kanye West trying to build homes, new Barbies, Rian Johnson comments, Joe Russo, all that and a lot more on the most recent edition of the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Welcome back to the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Alongside Sam, I am Mike. Just the two of us this edition of the show, but I think it's good. We can keep things on track. I was trying to invoke it that way.
Just the two of us, you and I.
Now, which
Mike,
Star Wars couple does that apply to the most? L3 and Lando?
That's perfect. Yeah, I can't top it. I can't. I was thinking maybe 3PO and R2 just for that desert scene.
Fair.
You know,
yeah.
If we could finally just ditch those junky Williams scores and get some real music in there. You know,
Ooh, could you imagine a Star Wars soundtrack that had a little Big Willie style in it?
If it was truly a soundtracked movie as opposed to a scored movie, it would be so. It would be so like. It would combat the timelessness of it so quickly. It would be a disaster.
We've stumbled onto something here, though. The alternate timeline where Star Wars does have to have a pop culture soundtrack. You know, maybe they are like, hey, Seal really worked on Batman Forever. Why don't we get him into a Star Wars? I think it's an option.
So I think you know this, Mike, that I have been doing, I guess I'll call it a recent, because it happens every year or two, deep dive on my missions. On my Mission Impossible movies. My Tom Cruise obsession is back in full swing, and I discovered, shout out to another great podcast, Light the Fuse. I think they're at Light the Fuse Pod. They are a podcast dedicated to the Mission Impossible franchise, and there are a couple of guys who work in the film industry or in like entertainment media, and so they have a ton of like really, really high quality, hard to get interviews. They talk to Brad Bird and Robert Elswit and McQuarrie and like all the people who've like stunt coordinators, people who've worked on these movies, and it's absolutely fascinating. But one of the things like that happens is when you listen to something with like such deep and dedicated fans as like the hosts, it's like I started noticing things in the movies that I wasn't aware of before, and the first three Mission Impossible movies all have like an end credits pop song. And so it was like they have U2, or they have like Bono and the Edge did the GoldenEye one. They have the other two guys from U2 did a song for Mission Impossible. Obviously Limp Bizkit did MI2, and then Kanye West did the closing title song for JJ's MI3, and that's a little teaser for some news we have coming up later.
All right, we do have more about Kanye. Wow, we could segue into it now. It is the perfect segue, but I think we'll save it for a little bit later in the pod because...
Hey, we're known for the quality of our segues, and I'd like to keep that quality right where it's been at since the day one of the pod, so we will save that later when we can awkwardly recall this as a perfect transition.
Well, as a transition that we usually do, let's talk about where you can follow us on the web. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can follow us DroidsPod at DroidsPod on Twitter and Instagram, the Droids Podcast on Facebook. Email us droidspod@gmail.com. Let us know what you think about the episodes. Let us know if you're feeling a little bit more of the Sam and Mike variety or the Chris and Ryan. You want all four? Tell us your favorite combos, and maybe we'll do a special pod just for you.
And I'll tell you what, we'll think about doing a special pod if you respond. We will definitely do one if you get the nomenclature right of the groupings. Or if you can just remind us what it is.
If you can remind us, I believe we are the Buttoned Up Boys. That is the correct one there.
Absolutely. And with good reason.
As let's button up and be right on top of it. Biggest story, and this is late breaking before the pod. I believe it came out the day we recorded. The Obi-Wan series is continually in the conversation. We want Ewan McGregor back. Is he going to be doing... Initially, we thought the Obi-Wan film would be a Star Wars story where we would see more about Ewan and Obi-Wan on Tatooine, what he was doing after he dropped off Luke and was protecting Luke with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. We likely have heard this, 7 times now that they were going to move forward with some version of this with Ewan McGregor. And every time the rumor floats, we feel like it's actually happening, and then it doesn't. So I'm not going to bite the bullet here. I mean, we're going to report this, but I'm going to say I still think that, there's nothing official, so there's nothing really new to feel like this is actually going to occur. And at what point are we not going to just be tricked by rumors that aren't substantiated?
Well, Mike, in the interest of good podcasting, I am going to, of course, bite that very bullet and say this is guaranteed, and you heard it here first, all right? This is hard and fast, definitely happening. No, I have look, I think we've all expressed how badly we want to see Ewan McGregor return, and we are very, very much not alone in that. He's universally considered if not the high point of the prequel trilogy, and even... with us as big fans or bigger fans than we used to be of the prequels, wherever you fall on that spectrum, it's like, he's great. He's charismatic, he's charming, he's a movie star, and he's an old school movie star in a sense. Just like what he brings. I have to guess that the challenges are kind of around, what's sort of like, the big one is like breaking the story. What's the story going to be? What's he doing in those interim years? And then it's probably just around, money. What's the cost of production? What's it cost to get him back at this point? Because his star has risen considerably and steadily since doing those films. In our opinion, I think I can speak for the pod, he's worth every penny. They should bring him back, whatever the cost. I do have a question though, Mike. Given your druthers, would you rather see an Obi-Wan series or an Obi-Wan standalone film?
That's really interesting that you bring it up, because I've thought always, give me the film. That's what I want. But there's so much that is different about expectations about films these days, in terms of especially franchise filmmaking, that I think it's probably better suited for a series, and you can play out the story that maybe takes its time a little bit more. You think the first hour and a half of Endgame, where it's all about how they are dealing with the fallout of losing everyone, and that feels almost like a different movie than the majority of what we've seen from the rest of the MCU. And the reason they could partially do that is obviously it was kind of part 2 in a story, and part 23 in a story, but part 2 of the Thanos interactions, and they had a 3-hour movie. With Obi-Wan, and the fact that a lot of what we would expect this series to be would be him trying to avoid conflict, I would think you could play out a more interesting story over 8 episodes than, say, a single movie, because a single movie, you'd probably just be sitting there, and most people who are not big Star Wars fans would be like, when's the lightsaber coming out? When's the lightsaber coming out? That's what I need to see. Less pressure on Disney Plus, more of an opportunity for them to, I think, flush out the story in a more interesting way and maybe give it over to a singular showrunner creator who can use their vision that is either not necessarily a genre send-up, but I think something that would feel a little bit more unique than what is now commonplace in franchise filmmaking.
That's interesting. I mean, I think that's really well put. I think that's a very strong case and argument. I guess I'll couch what I'm about to say in this, which is that we've yet to see Disney's live action Star Wars series. The Mandalorian could change everything one way or the other, right? It could be great. It could be the only way I want to consume Star Wars once I get it, or it could be less than that and reaffirm the sort of initial way you were describing thinking. I'm still there, by the way. I want a movie over a series.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think of why, and one of the reasons it's actually sort of in direct opposition to your final point, which is that I would submit that I'd rather a film where you have, you know, a singular auteur director's vision telling a perfectly, you know, confined, beautiful 2-hour story of that period. And I think a good filmmaker could do it. I kind of don't care about the genre audience, and I think it's been cited to death. But I do think, like, look at a movie as a template. Look at a movie like Logan. Look at what, and I mean, they were obviously talking with
James Mangold.
James Mangold previously, you know, and it's like that's the guy who can make this interesting. So I'd still love to see a film. I'd still love that type of film. Here's the other thing, and I kind of thought of this on the fly, but I actually think it maybe is the most true thing, the most true reason I want to film. I'll watch a film 100 times.
Yeah.
I'll never watch the series again. I can guarantee it. And
Really?
Yeah, I've never watched a TV series over, and I don't anticipate ever doing it.
I'm in the opposite camp in that one.
And I think Ryan and Chris are probably both with you. I think I won't speak for them, but I think both have watched series, and I think both would say it's very rewarding, and they would and will do that. Look, Mando could change that, you know, if Favreau, you know, auteur of auteurs, knocks it out of the park. I think, like, maybe it's something that I revisit frequently just to see all of the, you know, nuance he brings as a showrunner and sort of a creative force. But you know,
Sam,
just a visionary.
What's your favorite TV series?
Of all time, probably Breaking Bad is the best thing I've ever seen.
But you never wanted to revisit that? You never wanted to revisit,
you know what?
say, The Fly, the episode Ryan Johnson did, or Ozymandias, you know, some of the classic, incredibly shot, beautiful episodes.
I'll never watch it again. I think...
Never.
Like, I might... you know, I would be inclined to rewatch Star Trek. So this is funny. This is super against. We're getting really off topic.
Didn't you start a Star Trek podcast where you were rewatching episodes of Star Trek?
This is well, I started one. You see, checking on the feed to see how that's going. My co-host got poached by Mean Book Club. Shout out to Mean Book Club. Droid heads, Droid Army, go take them down. No, just kidding. Go listen.
No, please,
it's really good.
Go and dox them. No, I'm kidding. Please, don't do that.
Absolutely not. No, you know, I actually think that I'm a person. I'm a fan of. I long for episodic television as opposed to the more serialized stuff we're getting now. And I know that's crazy. And I know I just said probably the best series I ever watched. My favorite series is Breaking Bad. I also am a huge fan of Mad Men, and the first season of True Detective, all of which are like very much serialized narrative stories, long form storytelling, and those are all, I mean, that's the poppiest of the pop examples that you can give. That's on anyone's list. So I'm not saying anything really unique there, but like when I go to watch TV, I like stuff that I can drop in and out of. I like and so I watch a lot of older TV. I watch a lot of TV from the 70s and 80s, actually. Like, I watch a lot of, like, detective shows and just, like sort of the, like mystery caper type shows from, you know, Rockford Files and Remington Steele and
Sam, you're not cultivating
Columbo.
The millennial audience that we need for marketing dollars. Come on, man.
Just listen to the pod, Dad, please. So, you know, I don't think I'm the best for this, but I mean, that would be a reason for me. Like, I'm almost certainly, if they do a series of Obi-Wan, I'm almost certainly going to watch it once.
I would repeatedly watch it, especially with Ewan McGregor. I mean, obviously we need to see how it all, you know, is created and plays out, but I'd be more excited for an Obi-Wan series than The Mandalorian. I think the thing we didn't talk about is one of the reasons why I think a series is better is the reception of Solo. Not that I don't think you have as big an issue with people being like, obviously Ewan McGregor played the character before and did it well and everyone liked Ewan McGregor. They didn't say, oh man, we really wish it was Alec Guinness. Whereas with Solo, you needed Harrison Ford, and they didn't have Harrison Ford to draw the crowd. But I think you look at that movie that was set in a time period where there were no reasons for us to, I mean, we weren't going to learn more about the character, but it wasn't going to change where he ended up. That's sort of what you would have maybe with the film, and I think that can work in a series. I don't know if that works as well in the film industry anymore, because you need the event film to get people into the theater, because we just continue to see those diminishing returns on the box office for anything that isn't part of a franchise. And maybe Logan is the one exception, and one of the reasons why I think that did so well, because it was still connected to the franchise but outside of the timeline that we had seen be featured in, you know, the main new X-Men movies, was because it felt so specifically tied into what that audience goes out for, where there's going to be tons of action, there's going to be tons of Logan, you know, brandishing the adamantium claws. We know it's going to be dark and different, and yeah, that's going to get that core audience there. An Obi-Wan film that is, you know, if James Mangold had made an Obi-Wan, even though he was set up for the Boba Fett film, it's not going to be, it's mostly going to be like a pensive, almost reserved film, and I don't think that an audience is going to show up for that in the theater.
I think they might, and I think there is an element. You may be right, but I think it's about. I think it has to do with marketing it, right? Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing, the biggest thing with Logan, in addition to it being, I think it was like this thing where like the Wolverine solo projects hadn't made a ton of money yet, so they weren't too concerned. It was a little bit lower budget, but like, so they just went for it, and they knew, you know, Hugh was ready to be done. Like there was kind of a perfect storm around that film, so it was also kind of a bad example. But I do think that model, if Disney were willing and they had the stones to do it, I think that model would kind of work. Like give us, you know, get Ewan McGregor, you know, kind of out there promoting how it's like, all right, I'm going to do one last ride. I think I've got the perfect story. You know, really play up the story, play up the character angle. I think it could work. However, I do think it's interesting when you talk about looking at, you know, the obvious and direct comparison is a solo film, you know, which, you know, is taking, it is very much analogous to the idea of bringing Obi-Wan in for a solo picture. Let's use that as a perfectly not called out transition into talking about the Resistance, which got announced season 2 with its trailer, and that it's the final season. And I think that maybe, you know, we can speculate. I hope it doesn't speak to a sort of general state of things at Disney Lucasfilm on sort of an evaluation of their first foray into the Star Wars franchise.
I'm very surprised. Like, to end it after season 2, that's not. I'm sure that couldn't have been what was in the cards. You know, they're making.
There's no way that was intended. Like at planning.
And that's really surprising. I talked about it earlier on the pod. I think I'm the only one who's watched all of season 1. I really liked the direction it was taking in the finale. There was a lot that came together. The story of Tamara and what Tam's going through, and you see it in this trailer, is really appealing to me, and how she's dealing with the inner conflict of her friends she felt like betrayed her, and now she's turning to the First Order. And does she fit in the First Order, and does she see them for what they are, or are they more of the order restoring force that she wants in the galaxy, and is she going to take that? That's really appealing to me. And then everything's going on with Kaz as well. You know, I really am excited, and I felt like they were starting down the path of becoming more like Rebels or Clone Wars, and initially it wasn't that. And then we get this season 2 trailer, and I have to say, I thought it looked fantastic. I was like, wow, there's a lot happening in this trailer that really excites me beyond just seeing Kylo Ren and the joke about Matt the radar technician. You can see them wearing the outfit that he wears in SNL that Adam Driver wore. But there's a lot of, like, it seems they're almost going darker with it in the second season, and that looked really cool to me.
Well, Mike, let me jump in here, because I watched all of the first 3 episodes of the first season, and I have to tell you, I watched this trailer, and this was a trailer for a show I would watch. This was fantastic. I thought it looked great. I thought it had all of the hallmarks of a Star Wars show I'd be interested in watching. It had real stakes. It had a war happening that you could feel, and it had conflict, which is at the heart. Its central figures were experiencing conflict, and this to me is the version of the show in this trailer where you have a visual style and a few jokes that do appear to be aimed towards a younger audience. Like we talked a lot about how it seemed to be targeting some, a little bit aged down from what we maybe were used to with Rebels.
Yep.
In the initial season 1 stuff, and watching this, you have some pratfalls, you have some silly kind of gags, but man, it is set in a world that feels so much like Star Wars to me, where the first one didn't, in such a disappointing way. And
I would say it gets a lot more of that, though, than you had 3 episodes. It feels a lot more
I
like
watched
Star Wars
all of those 3 episodes, and let me tell you, it was doing nothing. I didn't care about a single character in it. I didn't care about a single person's position or what was happening.
Give it a little more time. There's more Poe. They get
what I
wanted
what I wanted when we all said what we wanted out of the series, I was like, oh man, a show about a bunch of pilots in the Resistance. I can't wait. This trailer too. It looks like it's a show about a bunch of pilots in the Resistance, and they're on the run. That is exactly what it. Yeah, that's what it should have been all along. Like, this is where it should have started. And if you started this show with season 2, I can almost guarantee you that they would not be ending with season 2, because it looks good. It looks interesting.
There's a lot more interesting that happens as season 1 goes along. I promise you, it does. I would say it's the best at the end, but there's a lot more going on with the pilots. You learn more about kind of the dynamics of the class system that's involved with the pilots as well. And the First Order infiltrating the Colossus is a indication of how everything began with the First Order following the path of the Empire, which they even reference in the Season 2 trailer, of them slowly building power and influencing through force, taking over power from the individuals and the different systems and the different stations like the Colossus. It's nice to see that kind of filling in some of the gaps of what we didn't know for The Force Awakens. And then obviously this then picks up probably post Force Awakens, before Last Jedi, because we see Kylo with his scar in the hologram at the end.
Mike, was it heavy? Was it heavy that big comically large check that Disney wrote you to say that?
Yeah, you know what? I figured that eventually you'd reveal yourself as one of those far right critic users saying that I'm paid off by Disney, but it's happened sooner than I thought.
Not my Luke. It's not my Luke. It's not my Luke. I'm not watching Resistance. No, look. I actually, this to me is maybe the best case that I've ever seen for reading the Wikipedia summary for season 1 and starting on season 2 when it comes out, because the animation looks great, as it did originally, but again, I'm just so interested in the characters. Maybe I'll go back and pick up at episode 4. I'm curious though so let's talk about the fact that it's ending, and that they're ending it at season 2, because it tells us it definitely tells us one thing, and it potentially tells us 2, right? It definitely tells us that this show did not perform and is not performing the way they want it to, right?
I would have to think so. I can't see how you could read it any other way. There's probably somebody who eventually is going to spin it. The only other thing that you could potentially say is and this is not, actually, I think this is maybe the best answer I could possibly come up with. Disney Plus is launching. They are, for some reason, whatever deal that they had in place, may have made contracts based on Disney Channel and Disney XD where this aired, and maybe they wanted to shift it and have the talent of the people writing and working on Resistance start creating a show for Disney Plus. And for whatever reason, there were some legal loopholes that kept them from shifting it to Disney Plus. That's the only thing I could think of, other than saying it's not performing well and we need to cancel it because of that.
I mean, that's an interesting thought.
They did it with the Marvel Netflix series.
But the difference is that Disney doesn't own Netflix. Disney presumably owns Disney Channel and you know what I mean? And owns Disney. So there's this kind of thing where it's like, it would have to be something on distribution, right? And that's possible,
And
it's possible.
agents are getting very good about, if you are not writing in all of the streaming plans, they then come back for more money, and if there's changes, they want to.
It's entirely possible. It's an interesting proposed reason for that. I'm dubious.
It's based on real information, just a theory.
I think the fact that you have four men doing a podcast that's weekly that exclusively talks about Star Wars and only one of them watched the show kind of speaks to, like, I think a larger thing that happened, which was that Star Wars fans have gotten a little older. The art direction and everything it skewed a little younger. And those first 3 episodes, Mike, I'm glad it got better, but they sucked. They were bad. They weren't good episodes. They weren't interesting. The characters were lame.
I don't know if I remember them well enough to go back and say
exactly.
But I'd have to.
They were not memorable.
Well, here's another thing to consider, and this is a very big part of it. Is if this is, you talked about the Star Wars audience aging. There's a problem with where people watch things and kids watch things. They just watch stuff on YouTube, and so when the show's not on YouTube, which it wouldn't be, they're not becoming fans, and they're probably not selling the merchandise and the toys that they would expect to.
I think there's a lot to be gleaned about the performance of the show. I think there's also a question. What does this say? So we're wrapping up the Skywalker saga. Episode 7, 8, 9. Episode 9 is going to be the end of the Skywalker saga. It's the end of this series with the new characters, with, Rey, Finn, and Poe, and Kylo Ren. It's definitely, unquestionably, it's the capstone to Disney Lucasfilm's initial foray since the purchase of Lucasfilm. And Resistance, for better or worse, its entire lot, it had its whole lot in with that storyline, right?
Yep.
It's set in that world. Now, I think there are probably some naysayers, probably some folks who are looking at this saying, this is a tacit, indirect acknowledgement that the new direction, that the Disney direction did not get off on the right foot or is in some way failing. And I really, really would resist that. I think that they've made enough money off.
You're resisting that theory about the Resistance?
I'm a resistor. I resist. No, I know that's not the line, but it's funny. But so I don't know. I think I guess I'm sort of bringing up that theory to also like quash it, because I think I think that's BS. But I imagine there's some camps that would suggest it.
But you bring up that theory, and it made me think they might have decided that now that the Skywalker saga is ending and not based on performance, because again, we know they made $1 billion+ off The Last Jedi. They're like, okay, it's time. We need to stop with any content that isn't in the next phase of Star Wars. Whatever that phase is. Well, they're doing The Mandalorian, which is back after Return of the Jedi. So never mind. That theory's thrown out.
Well, but,
I was trying to think that they might just be saying all of our stuff and our new content has to be in our next phase, and we can't continue to live in the past. And this is during Last Jedi or between Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, they might be saying we need to embrace the new.
But there's a tighter tie, right? I mean, at least as far as what we know, like the party line is that The Mandalorian is fairly independent, is fairly separate from what we've seen before, right?
Yeah. Whereas
it's isolated in its own corner. Resistance is directly tied. I mean, Poe Dameron's in it, right?
Gwendolyn Christie Phasma's in it.
Yeah, we've seen the characters are in it. It's tying itself very, very much, hip to hip.
Isn't it?
So, so it's a different thing. Look, I guess to sort of my sort of final thoughts. Again, I haven't seen this, but it looks like they are attempting and maybe going to do the thing that not a lot of TV shows get to do, which is end it on a super high note. I mean, whenever you only get 2 seasons, there's an opportunity that you have a chance to, the end date is coming. You can really, write the hell out of it. and it looks like it from the trailer. It looks like a pretty exciting season of television. It looks like a pretty on the nose, again, to me, feels much more Star Wars than what I got out of those early episodes. It's definitely encouraging me to watch season 2. It's potentially encouraging me to read about and or maybe watch some of season 1 beyond what I did, and so that's good for me. I don't, and you obviously watched season 1. Any other? You went pretty quickly and highlighted a few things. Was there anything else that you really wanted to jump on from that trailer?
Only that. So the Colossus, and spoiler alert, but I think if you've watched the season 2 trailer, you know this. The Colossus leaves the original planet and is not just a water station. It is an actual ship. And as it's in space, it's looking for a new home. They arrive on a planet that might possibly be Batuu, the planet from Galaxy's Edge.
Batuu.
Which would be a very interesting, even if they just go for a visit. One of the things that just seems to continue to be cool about Galaxy's Edge is that there are always like markers and indications throughout the park of things that have transpired. And think about if there's a episode in the series where they're in Batuu and they damage something or they leave a mark or something goes on, there could be a resistance impression left in the park that may not be there right now, but now that they've written this episode, they could add it in. I mean, that's kind of cool how the world might be able to continue to change.
It's very exciting, and hey, maybe that's why they're ending the show. Maybe they're just saying like, hey, if you love this story and this kick-ass season 2 that we just did, it only continues in person live for you at Galaxy's Edge.
Oh, that sounds... Rise of the Resistance is the name of the second ride that opens?
Just hire me for marketing, Disney.
Get us both. We both want to be there. All right, on to our next topic, which, speaking of the next phase of Star Wars, we have a couple of stories about that. Let's talk about Rian Johnson real quickly. Knives Out on its way. His new film that comes out in November.
So excited. So excited. This movie was made for me.
I mean, all of us on the pod, I think, are completely bought in. Chris Evans' scene where he's, to say it politely, telling off his entire family is beautiful and hilarious and amazing. But I think there's only been minimal comments. He hasn't been able to say very much. But there was a comment that he made about working on his next Star Wars films. And in it, he says that I think that the fun and challenging part of it is to dive in, figure out what's exciting, and then figure out what it's going to be. We're doing something that steps beyond the legacy characters. What does that look like? To me, the blue sky element of it is what was the most striking, or blue sky element of it is what was most striking about it. I know the way that I'm coming at it, and what's fun about it for everyone in Lucasfilm is figuring it out. What's the next step? It really makes you think and figure out what the essence of Star Wars is for me and what that will look like moving forward. And the essence of Star Wars for Rian Johnson, to me, is the essence of Star Wars, and go for it, do it all. Can't wait.
Have you ever heard somebody more successfully use more words to not say anything?
Honestly, I love that idea of trying to find the essence of Star Wars and thinking about what he did in Last Jedi, and to me, nailing the essence of Star Wars.
100%. No. I agree, and that was kind of a joke. Look, I think he's really smart. First of all, he's all sewn up in NDAs, obviously. He's also smart. He doesn't need to rush this. He doesn't need to earn the job anymore. He recognizes that there's going to be fans that love him, fans that hate him, so he's not really needing to try and impress anybody. And he also knows he probably wants to talk about Knives Out, more than he wants to talk about Star Wars. But what he does say here, in a way, is that it's the thing that excites him is that it's this blue sky element, right? It is a wide open, do what you want, run with it, take the football and go wherever you want. Which the elements that the four of us on the pod love most about The Last Jedi, I think, are all the elements that the reason they feel so Star Wars is because we hadn't seen them in Star Wars yet. So they felt very much, inventive and weird and in the vein of what George Lucas did in 1977. And that's what we loved about The Last Jedi. And that is the stuff that seems to excite him from this sort of long, not really saying anything type quote. But what the other thing it gives us is just it's the first time we've heard anything directly from him, really confirming and reaffirming that everybody who's saying, oh, he's on his way out, or oh, they don't like Ryan Johnson, or it underperformed, that's all of it untrue. The guy's been making a fun movie for himself that he's excited about, that's down to earth and about as far away from Star Wars as you could get, probably because he's about to leave Earth again for a long time and go to this galaxy far, far away, which is super exciting. I'm super excited about all of his projects coming up.
I would love if he left Earth for 3 films. I think he's going to write one and maybe work on the 2 others, but not write all 3. And speaking of writing one and not all 3, other news of the upcoming Star Wars films is that there's breaking news about, I believe from over a week ago now, so it's not actually breaking, but it is news about Benioff and Weiss. They're coming out of their cave from hiding from the finale of Game of Thrones, as they announced that they have made an overall deal with Netflix for hundreds of millions of dollars to create things for Netflix. They will do that while also working on Star Wars, but they will write a treatment for a trilogy and write one of the films. So they are not going to write all 3 like it was initially thought. They will start off and kind of set the groundwork for what a trilogy will be. Maybe this is a good thing, but the deal was altered, and pray they don't alter it further. Or maybe we do pray they alter it further.
I mean, I think it's interesting. This article, it broke on a Hollywood Reporter, and it does say that it was a change in the deal. That it was, or at least, that it was originally reported they would write all 3. It says the original deal was to write all 3. And so that either means that Benioff and Weiss took $250 million from Netflix and said, hey, we're getting paid better, we're not going to do it. Or it means that Disney said, yeah, we want to see your treatments, and was happy to let them take that $250 million. Who knows which party, or it could be mutual. But I think listeners of the pod know our opinions on the sort of quality of their writing and what these guys represent. It's definitely of the two announced trilogy of pictures that are coming. It's, I think, the one we're a little less excited about. I mean, the one exception is if they do something set in the Old Republic, if they do a sort of Knights of the Old Republic storyline, I think we'd all be bought in, because that's potentially interesting and in their wheelhouse. But they're a little bit less exciting to all of us. I will point out one of my favorite parts of this article. Again, it was the original story came out on the Hollywood Reporter, and it was mostly focused on the Netflix deal. And one of my favorite things was the quote was from Universal TV president Perlena Igbokwe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, so apologies. But Perlena said, certain people command 9 figures, and we've made those deals. Universal TV made a deal for $125 million with producer Mike Schur,
worth every penny.
Then he said, "But seriously." But Perlena went on to say, "Benioff and Weiss is not a deal that I went after." Such shade.
I mean, it's Universal. They can't exactly put Game of Thrones on NBC.
But what I'm saying is, just what shade. He opens the quote, certain people command 9 figures. This is not a deal that I went after. And, having it noted that you did make a 9-figure deal somewhat in recent history. I love that. I don't know why. Look, I don't have anything against Benioff or Weiss. I haven't watched Game of Thrones, so I can't really hate on them. There's just something kind of fun about somebody taking a shot at somebody who just got $250 million, because it wasn't me. So I'm happy to sort of laugh at them.
I would start my own Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever it would be, to raise $125 million for Mike Schur to make another Office, Parks and Recreation, The Good Place, as many shows as he wants to make. $125 million for Mike Schur is totally worth it. Absolutely. $250 for the Benioff and Weiss? No. But $125? Yes, please. Do more. Everything Mike Schur, please.
Can you start a Kickstarter for me to make $125 million, Mike?
If you write the next great cinematic, or no, what's a sitcom that changes everything? Sure.
Absolutely, and I've got a horse I'd love for you to come take a look at.
Well, speaking of directors, I have a question for you for our next topic. Sam, has it ever baffled you that Nick Fury looks exactly like Mace Windu? Have you ever been confused about the fact that those two guys look exactly the same?
Oh, I actually think it's in audio record that this didn't bother me at all. I never had a problem with it. I do know that one of our illustrious co-hosts really couldn't wrap his brain around the fact that it broke the universe, is I believe the term that Ryan used to describe the fact that obviously Sam Jackson, who plays Mace Windu in Star Wars, also appears in the MCU as Nick Fury. And as such, hay has been made with young Peter Parker referencing Star Wars, either with varying degrees of familiarity in his appearances so far in the MCU. Ryan pointed out, well, wouldn't he recognize Mace Windu is Nick Fury, and doesn't
Sorry
that break
to tell
the
you,
universe?
Ryan, that Peter Parker is very much a prequel hater. He never watched them. And that's why he doesn't recognize him.
Yeah, Aunt May. I think Aunt May went to see him. She was dressed. I think she dressed up as Leia. Went opening night. Marissa Tomei, and just she does not let. She said she threw out all Ben's copies of the VHSs. I don't know. I was trying. I don't know, but. They did address it. It came up on the Star Wars show, no less, and we have a definitive and official, at least for now, response from Anthony and Joe Russo, directors of 4 of the MCU films, including Infinity War and Endgame. Mike, the quote, what about Mace Windu? What about Sam Jackson? The answer? They just look like those characters, Anthony said. Joe clarified. Nick Fury just happens to look a lot like Mace Windu. So there you go, Ryan. It's been addressed. It's just a guy who looks like a guy. I don't know what to tell you.
Universe not broken.
Maybe they thought it wasn't really, worth devoting time in film to really, address the quibbles of fans who would have that problem.
The Skrulls can look like anyone. Maybe Nick Fury has always been a Skrull, and they saw the prequels and decided to look like that guy Mace Windu in the prequels, and that's why we have Nick Fury.
Mike, maybe, but I'm just telling you what the directors of the movie said.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to agree with me that my idea was pretty good and that maybe I should start writing some MCU movies.
Hey, look, I'm behind you writing some MCU movies. They also brought up that presumably this would apply to Paul Bettany's Vision as well. When he does appear in human form, he would look an awful lot like Dryden Voss from Solo, of course, and Peter.
Yeah, when he's in his human form, Solo had not released yet. I don't think so.
Peter didn't meet him though either, right? I guess Peter never met Vision, certainly not in human form.
No, I don't think so. No, you're right. So yeah, he wouldn't be confused or befuddled by that.
We'll save it for Spider-Man: Vision from Home, the third movie in the trilogy.
It's when Peter Parker crosses over in WandaVision. That's when it'll happen.
There we go.
Before we get to our final topic that we've teased multiple times in this episode, there are some new Barbies that look like Star Wars characters. One of them is Princess Leia, one is R2-D2, and one is Darth Vader. I think they look very nice. I like that they're doing this variety. The funniest thing to me has been inserting the Darth Vader Barbie doll into actual scenes that Darth Vader was in. And I've loved looking at that on the internet, where it's the Rogue One scene, and instead it's actually just the Barbie Darth Vader, or the Barbie Darth Vader entering onto the shuttle at the very beginning of Episode 4. I think that's my favorite part so far, mostly because I'm probably not in the market for a Star Wars Barbie doll like our buddy Chris.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. I was distracted. I just got an email. It says it was from Amazon. It said Chris has pre-order gifted me and all of us the set because he bought them. Because he buys everything from Star Wars. Actually, look, I think they're pretty cool. I especially, the Princess Leia one is great and fine, but I really like the R2 and the Vader ones. I think it's fun, and I think, Star Wars has not been the best series. I mean, recently they've done much, much, much better. Daisy Ridley's Rey is a huge, huge step forward for the series, but it's never done the best job of trying to be universal and be always progressive. And I think the idea of just eschewing the sort of genders as defined by the movie, or the assumed genders at least of R2, which is a genderless droid, and sort of saying like we can make dolls of women as these characters that are mostly going to be marketed towards girls. Mostly Barbies tend to be collected by young girls. That's certainly not exclusive and shouldn't be exclusive, but just that idea is like, why not? That's great. Yeah, make a Darth Vader Barbie. That's awesome. I love it. Like, if it's cool and interesting, hopefully no little girl who gets this doll then goes and watches the movie and gets disappointed that Darth Vader is actually a man in the movie. Hopefully they can enjoy all of the great women characters that have been in the movies and hopefully will be in the movies yet to come. I think they look pretty cool, and I'm just super excited that to see Chris's collection. It's going to be great.
All right, let's move on to our final story. This one, Sam, I know you got a lot of heart for. Good old Kanye West worked on some affordable housing that looked a little bit like some Star Wars domiciles, a little bit of, I guess, Tatooine-esque, and things didn't quite work out the way he maybe intended.
Well, this has been coming up in a lot of Star Wars news. If you're out there listening and you don't have Google or set up for Star Wars, what you doing? What are you doing with your life, man? I get an email every day. I know I'm on the pulse. My finger's on the pulse, which may be surprising to you because you may be like, well, then why do you never know what's going on, Sam? It's a conundrum. It's one of the galaxy's great mysteries. But this definitely piqued my curiosity. Look, it said the story around it is that apparently Kanye West has been inspired by the dwellings in Tatooine. I don't know if that's true or if he's just going for more of like a yurt feel with these. Who knows? But it's there's been a lot of traction already about how they're reminiscent of the sort of domed home structures on Tatooine. But basically in 2018, in an interview, Kanye West revealed, he's purchased 300 acres of land in Calabasas, like right next to his and Kim Kardashian's home, or right next to, but like near his and Kim Kardashian's $20 million home, or at least $20 million remodel. But his quote at the time was, it's my first community. I'm getting into development. So I don't know what that means. It seems kind of like the sort of Walt Disney thing of like, I'm going to build a community of people like me, for me, or something. It's kind of like a very Kanye West crazy thing to do. I'm very into it. And then there's this thing that it was going to be affordable housing, which is awesome and super noble. And I would actually love to see Kanye and Kim getting behind. Like, I love that they're invested in that. I love that they're into that movement. I'm slightly troubled by the fact that he bought 300 acres of land and just started building dome houses without any permits in the middle of the night. That seems like a bad idea, and it does seem like he will be in trouble for it because the LA County of Department of Public Works has now cited him for building without a permit. He has till September 13th to either provide permits or tear them down.
It seems to me like a future Hulu/Netflix documentary where they both go at each other for similar documentaries.
It's very Fire Festival. It's very Fire Festival indeed. Look, here's the thing. The worst thing in my mind that could happen would be for for the press to like make hay of this, totally drag him, and for ultimately, if it indeed is supposed to be affordable housing for Kanye West and Kim Kardashian to like drop that as a project. Kanye, look, we could do a whole podcast series around Kanye and what's going on in his mind at any given time. His career's been fascinating.
I don't know if we can make this an outpost. I don't know if it quite fits into the themes of the Star Wars podcast.
I'm not saying we. I'm saying we, but it's the universal we. It's the collective us. It's society can make this podcast because, like, I think he's had a fascinating career. I think he's an amazing musician. I think he's like a musical genius, and he's a creative.
Are you using his
oddity.
own words there?
What's that?
Are you using his own words?
Probably, but that's not my intent.
You know, the more and more I hear you speak, Sam, you are drinking the Kool-Aid on a couple of these figures. It might be a bit problematic, but
I'm speaking his words, or I'm speaking my own mind, but probably using his words. Which is that, like, but when you look at like all the projects he gets involved in, and he's also now like. He's like pretty crazy now. Like he's pretty crazy. And he bought 300 acres and just started building little domes all over it. Anyway, this is, if you guys want to read more about it, it's la.curbed.com. Yeah, so as of July 30th, he has 45 days. Otherwise, he has to tear him down and get $1,400 in fines. But like neighbors were complaining because he was apparently running construction crews at night to build these structures, which they look vaguely Tatooine-esque. I think there's probably any number of like architectural sort of influences on him. I'm hesitant to get into any more speculation because I'd be sort of talking outside of school. Like I don't really know, but yeah, I don't know. Look, guys, this is what constitutes Star Wars news until we get another trailer for Episode 9.
I actually think we had a lot of great Star Wars news leading up to this. Resistance, Obi-Wan. This is a solid ep. And we got in, and just be sure to look for 45 days from July 30th is when Sam will launch Kanye, a Con Pod.
The Yay Pod. It should be called like the God Pod or something.
But it's a con pod because his pods that he built in the desert are cons. And Kanye. Yeah.
What, Mike? You're too clever by half for me. You know what? This is honestly, and that's the end of the show. There, that's the perfect transition. That's the perfect transition. That is on par with our best transitions we've ever done. A missed joke.
And that'll do it. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the Droids Pod, droidspod@gmail.com, Droids Pod, Instagram, and Twitter. And, of course, rate and review us on iTunes. We will be back with another episode next week. This was pretty buttoned up until the last, 10 minutes there, Sam. I mean, I felt pretty good about the buttoned up pod.
Well, I got to tell you, I started getting warm, so I unbuttoned the top one. I unbuttoned the top button.
Yeah, okay.
I did that with that.
Next time, just embrace the heat of what a Button Boys pod gives you.
I had a blast. This is fun.
That does it for the Droid You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast.
What they throw